it comes to Rashee Rice, obviously it was announced today that he's getting a 6-game suspension. So we had expected him to be able to be playing the first 4 games of the year. And then the expectation was that at some point, it was like September 30th, September 27th, they were going to lay down the actual, what the ruling was. Well, we got that announcement today that Rashee Rice accepted the suspension from the NFL. That was that 6 games. I guess they met in the middle. The NFL wanted more. He wanted way less at like 3 or 4 games. They met in the middle at 6. What does this mean for our fantasy teams? So the Chiefs have a bye week 10. I want to say, let me get that right real quick. Hold on. I want to say it's week 10. Why did I feel like I knew that. Yeah, it is week 10. All right. So the Chiefs have a bye week 10. And what does that mean? It means Rashee Rice is going to miss the first 6 games of the year. He comes back week 7, week 8, week 9, and then he's on a bye. Then when you got the rest of the season, obviously 11 through the playoffs. So the fantasy playoffs start in week 15 for most teams. Sometimes it starts in 14. But you'll have them for like 6 games, 7 games, just depending on the length of your playoffs. I think Rashee Rice is less wide receiver 1 than we want to give him like credit for. I think everybody's going to think that, the minute he comes back week 7, instantly goes back into that wide receiver 1 role. I don't see it that way. I think this team has been kind of prepping for suspension with Xavier Worthy really taking on a different type of workload towards the end of last year. And then also this offseason, there's been a lot of talks about him playing in the slot, kind of assuming some of the role that Rashee Rice does. They can't really just wait for him to get back. It's like they kind of need that production, especially if they want to try some stuff downfield. A lot of the talk has been that the Chiefs are going to start operating a little bit more downfield. That's what this whole offseason has been dedicated to. So the way that I play this out is I think Rashee Rice is probably going to be like, if I'm drafting this weekend or this week, I probably would put Rashee Rice in like back in the mid-tier wide receiver 3 range. Like that's where I put him. And I think as the season goes on, he's probably going to have like wide receiver 2 value. That's what I think. I think Worthy's probably going to have wide receiver 2 value. And I think both of those guys will complement each other very well. I just think that with the emergence of Xavier Worthy, with this being Kelsey's last season, with all the weapons back for the Chiefs, you got Pacheco is back now. You got Hollywood Brown, who's healthy now and back. You drafted Jalen Royal. You signed Tyquan Thornton. It's not a big name out there, especially in fantasy, and he was a fallen name for the Patriots, Tyquan Thornton. But there's been a lot of positive stuff out of Chiefs camp, and he was a former second-round pick with size and speed, 4.2 type speed. Like, that's a piece that the Chiefs could use. So I think this Chiefs team has weapons, and I don't think this thing necessarily needs to rely on Rashee Rice, who's also not just going to be slow coming back from a suspension, but also seeing his first games since he was injured. I'm not overly concerned about the injury. Most injury doctors aren't really worried about Rashee Rice's health when it comes to being on the field. Just throwing it out there as far as a potential ramp up for a guy who hadn't played over the course of 6 weeks. So I don't know if he can practice, what that situation is. But Rashee Rice, I think this is more like if you're drafting right now, draft him more as a wide receiver 3. I think expecting wide receiver 1 numbers, especially out the gate, is kind of dumb. I think if you're going to get wide receiver 1 numbers, it's going to come either week 9 or right before their bye or just after their bye when they have a chance to implement things. Like real football-wise, teams have to adjust. They have to implement because if things are working the first 9 games of the year and Rashee Rice isn't the wide receiver 1, you better be damn sure they're going to keep things that way. The downfield passing game is working with Xavier Worthy playing that slot. You know they're going to keep things moving. So I think Rashee Rice is good. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I just don't know if we see that huge wide receiver 1 upside that we saw early last year before his injury. All right, so that's my thoughts on Rashee Rice. Great player, and I think this was actually better for him, low key. Like there was a talk that it was like 4 game he was going to be able to play, and then 6 games to 8 games to 10 games, whatever it was, he was going to be suspended. I actually kind of think this was best case scenario for him. Accept the plea deal. And best case scenario for fantasy managers, accept the plea deal, move on, start the season in week 7. So I think that was the right play for him. But overall, I think we need to pump the brakes on Rashee Rice. Yeah, he could be wide receiver 1 for your team during the fantasy playoffs. I think it's going to take a lot to get there. And you got a lot to do to get there. Because if you draft him right now, if you draft Rashee Rice right now at, in the top round, like round 3, round 4, thinking, okay, good. When he comes back, I'll be fine. that's a long time to go without a wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team. Like, that's a long time, especially like buys start week 5 this year, week 5, right? They always start week 5 or week 6. I can't. Week 5, no, they start week 5. Buys start in week 5, and that's 2 games already. You got to work through some buys. I don't know exactly who's on buy. I can't remember who's exactly on buy during those weeks, but you got to work through those buys and then pray and hope that Rashee Rice is like dominant out the gate, which I think he should be. He should still be like wide receiver 2 worthy, but you got to hope he's like dominant out the gate now. So that's where I'm at when it comes to Rashee Rice. I like the player, still think he's good, but I think this Chiefs team can move a little bit without him. That's what I think. So when it comes to Rashee Rice, that's my thoughts. As far as Xavier Worthy, I'm very excited about Xavier Worthy. Somebody asked me recently, they said, JHEN, you've been drafting a lot of Xavier Worthy as like your third in the mock drafts we've been doing. And I'm like, hell yeah, because if the suspension happens, if he does take a year 2 stride, I mean, I don't want to say like, I don't think I'm not comparing it 1-to-1 to like a Tyreek Hill, but like there is a need for his speed in this offense. We saw how dynamic this offense looked with a deep threat downfield. So I think if they can use Xavier Worthy in that role just a little bit more than they did last year, they kind of gadgeted him. They used him behind the line of scrimmage, would get him on reverses. They took a couple shots, but it wasn't as many as we wanted to see. I do think Xavier Worthy now has a little bit more ceiling, especially if he does assume some of that slot role that Rashee Rice was taking on last year. So for me, I like Xavier Worthy a lot upside-wise as your wide receiver 3. I know he's going to climb up draft boards right now. Where I would rank him is probably somewhere right near that, like just outside that top 15-ish type range. That's where I think Xavier Worthy should be right now. The only thing is he's not like a big red zone guy, so we got to see what the targets look like, and you're kind of taking like a leap of faith that this team's going to invest in him the same way that they did Rashee Rice. I don't know that he can carbon copy replicate the targets, but I do think Xavier Worthy is in for like a really, really big roll out the gate, and I think they're going to try some stuff with him downfield as well. So Xavier Worthy gets a big bump up. If I was looking for a secondary, this is a plus news thing for Travis Kelce, who's in his final year as well. Like, I think this is plus news for him. If you drafted him in like that mid tight end 1 range, I think you're spot on with that. And then as far as like the secondary receiver, probably a mixed bag between Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith, Tyquan Thornton, and Jalen Royal. They already sent out Sky Moore, so you don't got to worry about him. But probably a mixed bag between those. I would want Hollywood Brown, obviously. Like, obviously you want Hollywood Brown. But then I look at those next 3, and we might get a surprise out of there. Whether it's Juju, Tyquan Thornton, or Jalen Royal, I think one of those guys might surprise us. Like, in all seriousness. I don't know that we get like this consistent wide receiver 3 or flex for our team, but it wouldn't shock me in week 1 to see like Tyquan Thornton touchdown or like Jalen Royal. I think he's actually banged up right now. I think Jalen Royal's banged up. But Juju Smith, assuming a larger role, and he's got 4 to 5, like it wouldn't shock me to see another receiver on this team have a valuable role. I'm not picking any of them up. I'm not saying to go draft them, but what I am saying is just, keep your eyes open for this Kansas City Chiefs offense.